The first flowers of spring are just starting to poke their heads up, so they inspired me to post this small zipper pouch tutorial, which is perfect for Easter baskets with chocolates and candies and colorful art supplies, and I hope that you love this project and find it as useful as I do. So have a wonderful time with it. All the details are in the description, all the sizes and pieces that you need. And mostly you will need 2 pieces that are for the outside of the bag, 3-inch by 9-inch rectangles. And then we're just going to layer it onto batting. And then we're also then going to pick what inside fabric, like what inside the bag fabric you want, and then we'll use that. We'll put that on as like a backing. And so now I'm just going to quickly quilt through these rectangles. And I'm quilting these pretty heavily. I'm just using the edge of my foot so that I don't have to mark any quilting lines. And I just think these small bags look kind of nice with kind of like that small, dense kind of quilting. But you could honestly do like 1 inch into the edge from both sides and then 1 line down the middle, and you'd have plenty of quilting. So that would only be like 3 lines. So you could do a whole lot less quilting than I'm doing here. But even with doing all of this, it's only taking me 2 minutes to get the whole piece quilted. And we're making sure that the right sides are facing up from our front piece and from the inside the bag piece. So we're just going to quilt both of our rectangles here, and then we're going to take those rectangles and trim them down to that 3-inch by 9-inch size. So it might have distorted a little bit with quilting, but then we'll just kind of re-square that up. So if you do initially want to make those a little bit larger, and then you can just be like perfectly trimming it down, you can do that, but this is such a small piece, it's not going to distort very much, so it should be fine. And I basically just measure it with my ruler and make sure that it's 3 by 9, and then I'll just trim it with scissors. So I would really encourage you, if you haven't done like a quilted bag, this is a great place to start because it's small, but these little pieces are just really fun to do, and it's just a great texture for these projects. So we're going to add our binding strip to this, and it has to be one of those 2-inch strips, and this we just want to something that coordinates with your outside of the bag fabric, and this is going to be what attaches to the zipper, so it's going to be at the top of your piece. So if you do have directional fabric, you just want to make sure that this goes at the top of your pieces. And then we add this strip to the inside fabric. What we're going to do is sew it to the inside, and then we bring it around to the outside. And the reason why we do that is because whatever we sew this last seam on is the thing that looks like the straightest and the prettiest. So that's why we're doing that on the outside. So basically you just bring that strip around, you fold it in a little more than 1/4 inch, and then when you fold that edge down, now we can sew about 1/16 of an inch away from that nice folded edge, and it just gives us a really neat like strip here, and then we can add that onto our zipper. So it just gives this little bag like a nice professional look, and it gives you another element to like add like a contrasting fabric or just something that you think looks extra pretty on this. And we'll be doing some of these strips on both the inside of the bag and on the sides too. So again, these are strips you can pull out of your stash, or you can make sure they coordinate. It's just up to you. So when we sew these binding strips, when you first put them on, if your strip is longer, which I normally like to do, then it kind of hangs over each of the sides. And then when we fold it over and we sew it this way, then we can just trim it perfectly straight, which is kind of nice, especially when we're working on a bag where this is going to show up. So learning how to do binding strips, I've done so many of them that to me it's just super easy, and I just I think it's a great thing to just kind of use repetitively, because it can take like any raw seam and just turn it almost like into an extra design element. And I just think it's really nice. So some people, I hear them complaining like, oh, I don't want to do the binding strips. But if you get into the habit of using these, it really does make life a lot simpler, and your projects, it really elevates it. And if you do take your time on this, it is kind of nice, because then you can get a nice, you know, accurate, nice straight seam. So that really helps. And here I'm just going to trim it like perfectly straight. Okay, so now we're going to do that to both of our pieces. And then we have these on the binding strip area. We're going to add this to our zipper. So first we're going to put some fabric on the ends of our zipper and kind of make sure that our zippers are 8 inches long. And then we'll be adding that zipper onto these 2 pieces. So I guess I could have gone a little wild with the fabric choice here, but I decided to go like with a matching fabric, so you can see it just kind of blends in. Okay, so here I'm just taking my zipper, and this is a 9-inch zipper, so I'm just cutting the one end. I'm just trimming it where the zipper pull usually, you know, where it usually lies. So here I'm just taking a small square of fabric. I am folding in about 1/4 inch on both of the sides, and then I'm just going to use that as like an end to the zipper just to kind of clean it up, because again, this will be seen, so we just want to make sure that it looks, you know, it neatens it up a little bit. And also I like that, you know, I'm kind of trying to add like a colorful fabric and maybe one that has some pattern in it, because it really looks cute when you're done. So I'm just putting the end of that zipper right up to the center of this fabric, and that way we know like exactly where that zipper ends. And so now I'm just sewing, I would say about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and that way you're sure you're catching both edges. If you go too close to the edge, you might not catch the one underneath. And when I get to those zipper teeth, I usually just either sew through it slowly or hand crank it. If it's a metal zipper, I'll actually just kind of jump right over that, and I won't sew on that. So it just depends on your zipper and your machine. And here I'm just trimming it to the exact size of this zipper. So now on the other end, I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to check where like that exact 8 inches is, and then I'm just going to cut that straight off. So in my case, I'm cutting the end of my zipper off. So I'm not going to, you know, open it or do anything where that zipper pull might fall right off the end until I get the fabric on. And that way it acts as a zipper stop. And again, this is a good opportunity to take a small scrap and just kind of make it like a design element, because this will be on the top of the bag and you'll be seeing this. So again, I'm going matchy-matchy, but you could have, you know, picked like a real, like a surprise pop of color. That would have been kind of cool too. So then we just repeat this process on the other side, and you can even use a different fabric if you want, and it can be a different size or whatever you want to do. But it just gives us a nice edge on the zipper, since this will be seen in this project. But this is a nice way of just kind of making the zipper whatever length you need it, and then I'm just going to trim it equal to the zipper here. So I don't use like the zippers by the yard at this point. I have so many like regular zippers, but it is really nice to be able to like adjust things to the correct size. In this case, in this kind of a zipper, we just want to make sure that it's just like exactly what we need, and I couldn't really find the correct size, so this is just a great way of adjusting things to the size that you need. Okay, so now we're going to add the zipper to the 2 sides of our bag here, and we just want the outside sides showing with the nice side of our zipper. And all you're going to do is take those 2 nice sides of the bag, and you're going to make sure that it's centered so that you have about a 1/2 inch hanging over each side of that zipper. And that's really important because otherwise your bag won't lay right and it won't give you the right seam allowances on either side. So all we do is put that in the sewing machine flat, and then we sew. I usually leave between the teeth of the zipper and the binding strip about 1/8 of an inch. And then usually I'm sewing about 1/16 of an inch away from that folded edge on that binding strip, but it's more important to just try to sew straight on this strip than trying to get super close to the edge. And so here I'm just opening that zipper pull and pulling it back so that that doesn't kind of make my sewing wonky. So for doing the zippers, it's not like a very long seam that we're sewing kind of anywhere on this bag. So it's fine to just take your time and just try to get things nice and straight. And you can sew a little bit and then stop and adjust it. And that's kind of the way I've been doing this bag. And in a way, it's almost like sewing like a little miniature project. So it's kind of nice to be able to take your time a little bit. And then we just reposition the other side of the bag and just make sure that both of the outside sides of the bag are showing. And we're going to add the second side of the bag in the same way. So again, to just make sure, like, you know, for me, I make like 1/8 of an inch showing from the zipper teeth over, but you just want it to be consistent. So whatever you did the first time, just try to match it the second time. And then this is what we end up with. And we're going to turn that bag towards the it's almost like inside out. And we're just going to clip that so that it stays nice and straight. And if you do need to trim anything to get it straight, that's totally fine. At this point, you want to make sure that your zipper is open. So now we're going to take this, and it doesn't matter which side you do it, but we're going to add a binding strip. And whatever works for you, this is going to be on the inside of the bag. So I kind of like doing like a real contrasting color, at least on this project. And that way when you put things in the bag, it kind of, it just looks really cute, I think. So when we sew this bottom seam together, we're at the same time going to be adding this binding strip to it. So you need something that's about 2 inches wide or 1 3/4 inches wide by about 10 inches long, and that way you can have a little overhang on both sides of the bag. And we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to sew this down, and then we're going to bring it around to the front, and then we'll re-sew it down, and then we will trim those sides nice and straight and even. And now at this point, the sides of the bag are still completely open, and you want your zipper open so that we can turn it inside out. So you just want to fold it in. We just bring it around to the front, then you want to fold in about 1/4 of an inch or a little more. And then we just kind of realign that, and then we're just going to sew that one. So it's a nice quick way of getting a seam and a binding strip in pretty much the same amount of time as just doing a seam. So the fact that we have this seam at the bottom of this bag helps us to, like, if you want to use a directional fabric, you can. But I do really like the seam at the bottom of the bag, looking at it from the inside. I just think it's really cute. So we're going to be turning the bag inside out at this point, but if you did want to do these side seams on the inside of the bag, you can definitely do that. I'm just doing them on the outside of the bag because I think it just looks extra cute with this small zipper pouch. But if you wanted to add those on the inside, you could definitely do that if you want to, because I made one like that as well. It's just not as cute as doing these binding strips on those edges. So the 2 little strips we're going to need for these edges, I put, like you might need a 5" by 2" or 5" by 1 3/4 wide strip. But what we want to do is we want to pull out that bottom seam, just make sure that it's, not tucked in too much, that we've just got it pulled out. But you can see how cute that looks. And we'll just make sure this side is lined up and it's straight. And if it's not, you can definitely trim it if you need to, but it should be hanging over about a 1/2 inch. So anything between a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch is fine and it will work. And we're going to add a binding strip here. So I kind of cycled through a few different fabrics to just see what would look cute on the side. So we're just adding the strip, and then when we do the other side, we're going to fold the ends of that fabric in so that gives us a nice finished edge. So you can see here we have like extra fabric where we can fold the end in, and I'm trying to show you really close up here, and then you basically fold that you know, the same way as we were, but now you have a nice finished edge instead of that raw edge. And you just do the same thing to both sides. And then I'm just going to clip that before I get it to the machine. And then you just sew down that side. Well, what you do want to do is you want to take a few stitches and then back tack at these ends. So this sewing is a little bit bulky, so usually I'm either hand cranking it at the two ends, or my machine I can take like one stitch at a time, but I usually just slow it way down, and that way I don't get jamming or anything like that. So that might be a good way to do it. But when I need to, I will do like a couple back stitches just to make sure I can secure it. Okay, so our bag is done, and as I said, I'm using one of these for my smaller like eyeshadow makeup brushes, and I'm also going to use one of these in my purse for pens, and I checked and it holds about 7 pens, but this way my pens won't get lost in my purse. So, but these are so fun to make, especially in all these different fabrics, and it's just a real cute little project. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you're going to use up some of your Great Haul fabrics and your different supplies, and hopefully we'll have things to remember Joann's by. So thank you so much.